And I would like to thank everyone for coming in, giving your important time in a beautiful weather like this today. And I would request everyone to mute yourself, please. And whenever whoever is doing the speaking, you can unmute yourself. Before we start, I would like to request everyone to pray for all the people who give their lives for their languages. So I would say that if we can give a minute silence for all the people, so please join me. Thank you very much. Normally, we organize this event at the city chambers, and I would like to thank Lord Provost for giving us a chance to have it at the city chambers. Every year, we do get all the help from the city, Edinburgh City Council, and Lord Provost organizes and breakfast for us in the morning. So thank you very much, Lord Provost, for this. Hopefully, if things get better, we will be able to do it again next year. And same time, I would like everyone to pray for all the people who lost their lives with this pandemic time. COVID-19 has taken a lot of our loved ones away from us, so we do need to pray for them as well. The theme for this year, 2021 International Mother Language Day, is fostering multilingualism for inclusion in education and society. So I would like to thank everyone for joining today. But before I start introducing the speakers, I would like to ask our Lord Provost to do the welcoming. So our Lord Provost is also the patron of Edinburgh and Lothian Regional Equality Council, and he's been with us for a long time now. So Lord Provost, you need to unmute yourself.
There you go.
Mizan, can you unmute Lord
All
Provost?
the basic mistakes we make, yes. So welcome, Falsha and Shagotum. Chairman Chowdhury, Honorary President Professor Sir Jeff Palmer, elected members, ELREC staff members, volunteers, ladies and gentlemen. It is my pleasure as the Honorary Patron of ELREC and as the Lord Provost of the City of Edinburgh to join you in marking UNESCO International Mother Language Day. At the current challenging time, whilst we cannot be together physically, we can come together in joint spirit and cause. And I'd like to thank ELREC for inviting me to participate alongside other key speakers and with you all as we mark this very important International Day and its objective of promoting the preservation and protection of all traditional languages. Edinburgh is a truly multinational and a multicultural city with just under 10% of the city's population comprising people of different ethnic origins, with those from China and India being the largest groups. But over the last few years, over 35,000 new workers to the city have come from overseas, with around 70% from Europe and 10% coming from China and India, with the remaining groups coming from Asia and the Americas. Now, Edinburgh continues to have a strong outward or diaspora profile, with strong connections with every continent through 12 twinning and partnership arrangements. The capital is also engaged with Eurocities, a network of 140 cities in 39 different European countries, and the World Cities Forum, involving 37 other major capitals globally. Edinburgh is also a long-established partner of UNESCO, being the very first international city of literature. The city is therefore very familiar with UNESCO's objectives for celebrating international culture, heritage and diversity, and is therefore supportive of the 2021 International Mother Language Day, which recognises and respects linguistic and cultural diversity and its contribution to strengthening the unity and cohesion of our community and wider society. Now, in ordinary times, Edinburgh would have many examples of how we celebrate our diverse communities, encouraging the expression of traditional culture and language across our capital. Some examples are our young students who attending City of Edinburgh schools, council schools, where more than 120 different native languages are spoken at home. And in our most recent full international festivals of 2019, that seems such a long time ago now, the Fringe Festival had either artists or media or audiences from over 150 different countries. Our film festival had 18 world premieres and 12 international premieres. And of course, our very important Mela and Diwali festivals provide a hive of multicultural dance, art, music and food for a truly international audience. Now, these events as an expression of Indigenous culture work to apply the use of the mother tongue or use of traditional language to enable, as this helps to preserve unique cultural and traditional identity across our people, artists, and indeed the audiences. And I hope that these examples offer a flavour of how we as a city routinely welcome friends from across the globe, and that we're proactive in both respecting other cultures and traditions and in learning from each other and how we can continue to mature as a multicultural capital in a globally diversified community. To some extent, our city, its diverse communities, and in general how people communicate with each other and about each other can help shape the way we think and how we think about each other. Now, over the years in Edinburgh, this has improved. However, as highlighted in recent political movements across the world, we know that many of us need to do much, much better. Disagreeing with others is one thing in a free society, but disrespecting others and acting upon this with related verbal, written or physical threats or violence continues to remain utterly unacceptable to us all. Now, as we can observe from celebrations of traditional language in Scotland, from Burns Day to Glasgow's Basha, to Languages Week across our schools, the learning of traditional and other languages enriches lives and improves opportunity and skills gains. Respecting our neighbours, traditional language helps us to learn from other parts of the world and encourages us to grow our shared understanding of other cultures, traditions and ways of life. Appreciating other languages encourages a deeper understanding of tolerance and cohesion, as our mother tongues and our related heritage helps us find our place as citizens. The proper use of language, be that mother tongue or another tongue, is perhaps one of the most important tools at our disposal, which we can use to promote cultural harmony and respect. Any cultural differences that we have should be celebrated, not dismissed or be the basis of discrimination. And as more of us live our lives globally, with family, business and travel taking us to places that even 50 years ago would have been all but unreachable, there is ever more need to remember and cherish our connections with our past, with our wider family and with our community. Now, in considering why this International Day is so important and the event so critical, I recall from last year that it was stated that 43% of an estimated 6,000 dialects spoken on the planet are now endangered, and that less than 100 of these are utilised in the digital world. Now, to lose such a swathe of traditional heritage due to an increase in the use of digital platforms such as the one we're on this evening is unfortunate, as it could be reversed. It could be reversed if we all worked harder to prevent this and demand that traditional communication tools be developed in the marketplace. Becoming more connected with the assistance of the digital world and social media is especially important in the current context, as the Chairman has already indicated, as we together deal with the global impacts of the coronavirus pandemic. Now, sadly, our city has gone from a flourishing economy with a very strong social fabric to one that is characterised today by many empty streets, closed doors and limited services. Many of all faiths have experienced loss increased poverty, increased loneliness, or indeed isolation. However, our city and our communities are resilient, and I've seen this demonstrated in the incredible volume of voluntary effort that's been taking place for nearly a year now, with many of those furloughed catering for our most vulnerable, and indeed ELREC was heavily involved in that process, with families helping their fellow neighbours with shopping, gardening, transport or other activities. And our community projects, public services and businesses coming together to assist those who have lost their incomes. And we can never forget the heroism of our health and social care workers who have been at the sharpest end of all, but have thankfully continued to care for our most sick and worst afflicted by COVID-19. But even in these demanding times, there remains places where a person's language will still see them excluded and living without the full protection of the law. As much as communication is the bridge between all peoples, language can also be a barrier which keeps out as much as it defends. Especially now, we must all ensure that this does not happen. When we strive for inclusion in our society, it cannot be for all people to think and behave and speak in the same ways. We must continue to invite others to share their heritage, traditions and cultures with us, and indeed celebrate the mutual gains in our society from such inclusion. In Edinburgh, I'm proud that we have for many years continued to maximise access to both general and bespoke interpretation and translation for those in our communities, be it residents, visitors, or those working or studying in our city. Enshrined in Scotland's equality laws, there is and should be no barriers to those who wish to use their mother language and who wish to fully participate in our inclusive and friendly capital. Now, against the backdrop of planning for our recovery as a city, we have much to celebrate. Our shared multicultural aspect, our traditions, our history, our diversity, our strong belief in community, our willingness to help each other. And it is these unique characteristics upon which we will rebuild our fabric that will return us to a positive, purposeful and productive collective future. I'm especially proud of how our citizens and our health and care sector have responded to those in distress as a result of the virus. We've seen how our communities and services have helped each other, illustrating just how strong our collective sense of community really is. And this has to be celebrated and built upon, especially as we look towards the beacon of light that is now the vaccine. And while a return to normal life in a normal Edinburgh is still a good bit away from us, as the vaccination process gathers pace to protect us, we need to still observe the restrictions that are in place. So please, stay healthy, stay safe, but most importantly, consider getting the vaccine when you are invited to do so by the appropriate authorities. My best wishes to you all for the next year as we look ahead to reclaiming our city as a world leader in supporting inclusion and diversity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Provost, for your valuable speech. Yes, I totally agree. I think we should congratulate and thank NHS staff for the work they've been doing. They've been really working hard, keeping us healthy, safe, and I would like to ask everyone to help NHS, stay at home. If you don't have to go out, don't go out. So please do maintain the government guideline. And as our Lord Provost says, please do go for your injection if you are if you've been requested by NHS. So, and please do not listen to any false media. So we've been listening to NHS for all our life, so we should trust them. So our next speaker is our honorary president, who's been involved from the beginning of ELREC, and who doesn't need any introduction. So I would like to request Sir Jeff Palmer to do a speech for us and tell us about International Mother Language Day.
Well, thank you very much, Chair. And I would also like to thank our Lord Provost of the City of Edinburgh. He's been a great support to the BAME community from the very moment he took office. And I would like to sometimes we forget to thank the people who we should. But I'd like to take this moment just to say thank you very much, Lord Provost, for your support and for the quality of the speech you've just given us.
Thank you.
When I first came to the United Kingdom in, I think it's 1955, I remember, 1955, I was 14 years of age, and I arrived in Liverpool. The ship arrived in Liverpool and I didn't know where I was. And of course, I was speaking with a Jamaican accent, the Jamaica patois. And I got off the boat and I didn't know where I was. I just traveled, I left Jamaica. The next place, I'm in a place called Liverpool, and I'm supposed to get to Paddington. And I had no idea where Paddington was. So I got off the ship and I saw some people on the street, and I said in a Jamaican accent, where's Paddington? And of course, my Jamaican accent was worse then. So nobody have a clue what I was saying. However, somebody stood and listened until they realized that I was saying, Paddington. And put me on a train and I got to Paddington. Of course, my mother was there waiting for me. But that was my first experience of realizing that I didn't speak the same way somebody else did. And therefore, one of the things about that is she couldn't understand me and I couldn't understand them. The point is though, but somebody stood and listened and tried until, in fact, we communicated with each other, partly through language and partly through sign, etc., etc. So when I arrived in London, there were great debates in 1955 whether, in fact, the non-white community, especially those from ex-colonial countries, whether they should integrate. Even though I was not well educated, I understood the argument. There were a group of people saying people from overseas must integrate because, and therefore they should lose their identity. They should lose their language because it was being put forward that language differences and cultural differences was going to cause problems in the future. And there were a group of activists who protested that people should retain their culture and retain their language or languages, because somehow, and we've then got to be very careful because there are still people today who think the same, that integration is a way of showing your loyalty. Integration is a way of this foreignness, because your languages and your culture is your special days. They don't want that. But there are people that I've known from the 50s to today who fought for people to retain their difference. Now, what is interesting, suddenly, I think I was in Edinburgh at the time because this was in the 1960s. And we'd now gone from a getting rid of culture, integration, it was called, and we then switched to multiculturalism. And we had a multicultural society then, and people were talking about multiculture and the whole idea then of losing your culture went. And then I always remember one day in Edinburgh in the 60s, I heard that we had shifted from multicultural to diversity. So diversity came after multiculturalism. And there were people like Trevor Phillips who were saying, multicultural is dead and it's completely irrelevant. I still think multicultural is important. I'm sounding old-fashioned, because language is about multiculturalism. Differences in language are about multiculture. And I don't see why we can't have people with their own cultures and be loyal British citizens. You don't have to speak only English, and you don't have to be white to be British. And somehow these are some of the negative aspects which we've got to get rid of. That, you know, if you speak a different language, it doesn't mean you're not British. And we've got to get that in our schools, because the power of difference, and the way you know, I've said recently on, I think it's Sky or LBC, they were asking me about, you know, diversity. And again, people are playing on the fact that different communities were more susceptible to the COVID virus. And the whole idea at the beginning, we tend to forget that. At the beginning, they were saying BME people were more susceptible to the virus, and it was genetic. And that's a very dangerous concept. It's not that we're all human beings, and therefore we all got the same response to this virus. The very fact that we were, there were higher percentages in the BME community was social. It was poverty, it was job type, you know, it was living conditions. All these things were the cause, not multiculturalism, not differences due to language or skin color. It was the virus actually exposed the poor social circumstances that people from different cultures have been living in. And therefore, when I was asked about, you know, this diversity and whether it's a good or bad thing, and what I pointed out then, and I think people have heard of repeating it, a diverse society needs diverse management, or it is going to be inefficient. A diverse society needs diverse management, or else it is going to be inefficient. And what I mean by that is, for example, when Guinness had a problem, the brewer in Nigeria, they were looking around for somebody to go and look at the grain there and decide whether we're going to use European grain or the African grain, sorghum, which grows in India and other parts of the world. And the company chose me to do that because I had the scientific expertise, and I also understood something about African culture. And therefore, I was the obvious choice. If they chose a white person, they would lose that overall, you know, efficiency or package. And therefore, we have a society with all these differences. And therefore, if we don't use them, in terms of the way somebody from Asia sees something might be slightly different from the way I see it as from Jamaica. But the general principles are the same. And therefore, multilingualism, meaning that different languages, different the way people talk, the way they look, the way they see things are critical for our survival as a society. And therefore, what we should do, and the essence of this multi-language event today, is about how can we keep that multiculturalism in our schools. You know, we can have people from different cultures putting on plays, speaking in their own language. And we can have people translating, because that can be done. We can have things videoed with subtitles. And therefore, what we're trying to do is to give the Bengal speaking people or the non-Patwa people a feeling of those cultures in that language. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. You know, people on the continent speak 3 languages, French, German, you know, or Dutch. Why can't, in fact, we have people here using their language in order to give us a better understanding of themselves? And therefore, what I will do, there's a time factor, so I will try to end now. But we have these differences which are thousands of years old. Thousands. So why should somebody stop speaking something they have inherited, which is 1,000 years old, because somebody says they don't like the sound of it? And I believe that we are different, but the same. We, as human beings, we we're one humanity. We're one humanity with differences, and we should celebrate those differences, not in fact try and remove them. And therefore, I think for the future, for our schools, for our society as a whole, we should respect and try and help people to keep their languages. And therefore, if we can have a multicultural society, we can have a multilingual society. And I think all these things will make our society more peaceful, but it'll also make it more efficient. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Subject Palmer. It's always good to hear from you. And thank you very much for a very informative speech. And I totally agree. We are all different, but we are all same. So before I go to our next speaker, I can see there's few people I want to mention who is in the screen just now. And I'll request everyone to inbox me messages, which organization you're from and what language you speak as well, please, if you can do that. I can see Rohini Sharma Joshi, I think who's the chair of many organizations. One I know at the moment is MKS, and she's with us. Thank you, Rohini. I can see Shahanur Chowdhury, who is the chairman of Bangladesh Catering Association, joining us. So, Mr. Chowdhury, thank you. Wajay Singh, Wajay, thank you very much for joining us, brother. He is the secretary of Gurdwara. Rajneesh Singh, who is the chair of Indian organization, Indian Association, and is also the secretary of ELREC as well. And I think he's involved in many other organizations, including Edinburgh Mela. And I will, if I have missed anybody, please inbox me. I will mention it after our next speaker, who's been very involved with our community for a very, very long time. She's one person. Every time you call her, anytime at night, you'll get her calling you back or attending any event we've organized. I would like to ask Sarah Boyack to do her speech at the moment. Sarah Boyack, MSP. Sarah, you need to unmute yourself.
Yep. Thanks very much, Faisal. And I was really glad when you invited me to this meeting and to this celebration of our culture and our shared culture. And it's for me, it's quite a timeline, because the day was officially initiated by UNESCO in 1999. And that was the year our first Scottish Parliament elections were held and the Parliament was set up. And when I think back over the years, one of the things that has made the responsibility and enjoyment at times is actually being able to network with people from different communities. And when I think about the speech the Lord Provost made, listening to one of the key leaders in our council doing a speech about embracing how we all come together, to think of the shared culture, what's special in Edinburgh, is actually quite inspiring. And to think that we've been able to do this in Edinburgh over the years is even more important. And when I think about different events that ELREC has organised over the years, all of us standing outside the city chambers, being able to catch up and network with everybody. And I know from my early days in the Parliament, it was particularly important to the Bangladeshi community, as it was on the 21st of February that the fight for their Bengal language gained momentum. So there's lots of shared history that I can see in the faces round the room. And I'd have to a quick personal thank you to Jeff for making me feel very young. The fact that you had arrived in Britain in 1955 is making me feel like a mere youth in terms of the experience that you've had over the years, and bringing your knowledge of brewing into multiculturalism and to global leadership and to diverse leadership. There's nobody else is able to do that, Jeff. So it's been great to hear you today. And also, I don't know about anyone else, but when we had Black Lives Matter last summer, it gave Jeff a platform, and it gave people from different communities in our country a platform to talk about how racism has impacted on them, the social inequalities that have become much more sharp during the pandemic. And you have to find things to celebrate in tough times. And that was one of my small celebrations, Jeff, was seeing you on our TV, seeing people interviewing you and bringing that diverse experience that you've had and that leadership role to people who would never have experienced that or not had the knowledge before. And I think in terms of education, this year's theme of fostering multilingualism for inclusion in education and society is definitely something that we need to all to be focusing on, because it gives us the challenge for all of us about how we think about how we promote the use of our mother tongue much more than we already do. And in terms of education, ensuring that people's heritage is recognised is important, so that everyone's background, everyone's history, everybody's family history is actually acknowledged, and that children from different backgrounds learn about their friends in school, that they all have things that they share, but there's also things from their backgrounds that are interesting, that are different, that are part of the world that we live in. And when I think about in Scotland, we've got communities in Scotland for whom English isn't the first language because Gaelic is the first language. And when I think back to some of the early days of the Parliament about how Gaelic became more important, and the principle of allowing Gaelic to be taught in schools and having the Gaelic school in Edinburgh was a really big discussion for us. So I think we need to reach out and we need to think about how the schools work, because understanding and being able to celebrate your heritage and being part of you from an early age is really, really important. And I think for us in Scotland, we've always been a welcoming community. And it's important that the communities we've had with different mother tongues are acknowledged, are welcomed, are celebrated, and that that's integrated into the languages that we're taught in schools, but also that the history reflects those different languages and it reflects where people have come from. And if I can use a couple of Scots words, because Gaelic is not part of my history. My history is central Scotland in terms of my family, a wee bit of Irish culture chucked in, but not to the extent to which my generation ever learned it. I thought it was great to see so many Wheel Kent faces. I don't know if that's a phrase that you all know, Wheel Kent faces, on the call. And I have to say the banter at the start of the call before we got really formal was great fun. And it kind of reminded me that we are all missing catching up personally on a one-to-one basis. Because one of the highlights of attending events with different culture is you get to listen to somebody's culture, you get to embrace it from their perspective. It's translated, it's brought home to you. And can I say, I've not had a lot of highlights this year. Now, to be fair, we're only getting towards the end of February, but, you know, not a lot of highlights so far. But one of my personal highlights was attending online Burns suppers. Now, I love Burns suppers because one of the things I've done over the years is toast to the lassies, reply from the lassies after the toast to the lassies. I've had a couple of goes at doing toast to the laddies, and I like singing and I like Burns's poetry. So I like reinterpreting it all and making it 20th century, 21st century. So this year I went to some Burns suppers online and I had my haggis. I was all organised, sitting in the house on my own. But can I tell you my favourite Burns supper this year? It was actually organised by the Scottish Indian Arts Forum, because it was a totally different Burns night. It wasn't the Burns night that I would have traditionally spoken at. It was a breath of fresh air to Scottish history and to Scottish poetry, because it brought the relationship with India that somebody like me as a traditional Scot, might have learned history. I might have learned about colonialism at school. I loved history, but I didn't know the Indian take on Burns Night. I didn't know the Indian take on Burns's poetry and how that got exported to India and how that was changed and how it got reinvented. And it was inspiring. It opened up a shared history. And in terms of today, thinking about the mother tongue, it involved a whole range of young people who'd been encouraged to get involved, who were reading Burns's poetry from their backgrounds, different accents, and bringing a different depth, bringing a different perspective to it, doing beautiful renditions. We had traditional Indian dancing, but to Scottish music. I have to say, I really felt for the dancers because they were wearing beautiful costumes and they were dancing in Princess Street Gardens, and it was classic Scottish weather. It was raining. It was pretty miserable, but they managed to bring some light into our lives. And we had Indian music played with traditional Scottish bagpipes. So there's something about our culture where we share, where we cross over our culture, where it's a reinterpretation of somebody else's culture. And that's really powerful. And the pandemic has been awful because it's kept us apart. We can't have the socializing that we love, that is about our shared cultures and learning from each other. And it's important in terms of extended families where people are isolated and the community connections that we all have, that we've shared over the years, have been stuck. And in talking to Faisal over the past few weeks and in the 1 minute silence we had today, it really is, it is tragic the extent to which the pandemic has swept through particularly Black and ethnic minority communities. And as Jeff said, it's because of people having to share houses that are very small, people having to still go out to work, people not having the protection that they should expect from employers. There's a lot of lessons that we need to learn. But I think one of the things we need to do is think about how we keep supporting people. One of the things I found inspiring is the fact that there are food banks operating in our city. There are people keeping families supported who don't have the money to keep going. But in Edinburgh, this big international city that we love, that's been, as the Lord Provost said, transformed. We've gone from over tourism to no tourism, to our hospitality industry being hit. And I'm sure that's been a massive impact on organisations like the Bangladesh Catering organisation. But what's been inspiring is watching how people have responded, whether it's NHS workers that we've all idolised and clapped, and many of whom are from Black and ethnic minority communities doing jobs, particularly in the care sector, that are not well paid, but they're keeping families going, they're keeping people connected, and they're keeping people supported. And the catering businesses, hospitality sector, which is just, you know, it must be horrific to lose all your business overnight, to open up and then close again. So the economic changes that people have had to deal with, and particularly those communities that are catering related or hospitality related, that rely not just on tourists, but on people going out on the way home from work, people getting takeaways to take home at the weekend. Those businesses, we have to look out for each other, and we have to thank them for all the work that's been done to keep things going. And I'm hoping that this year we will see the International Festival begin to come back, so that our city begins to open up, because the International Festival has been going since the Second World War, since after the Second World War, and it's been a way to celebrate different cultures, people coming to Scotland, people in Scotland, and all of our communities getting involved. So I'm hoping that we'll begin to come back, that we'll begin to see hospitality open. And one of the things I want to do in the future is to see the faces that I'm looking at on Zoom tonight, to see it in person, where we might be able to share poetry. We might be able to listen to people like Jeff and the Lord Provost in person, even if it's outside the city chambers and it might be raining slightly, but that we can be together sharing our glorious Scottish weather. That the Mela, bits of the Mela might begin to come back, even if some of that's online this year. And to think about how we keep that connection going amongst all of us, because it's about sharing our cultures, it's about celebrating cultures, and thinking about the mother language that makes our societies unique and different, but also things we want to share together. And I hope the thing I really want to finish on is hope we will be able to share meals together, whether it's going into restaurants, whether it's sharing a meal at the Scottish Parliament or at the Council, where people have worked very hard to think about the shared relationships we've got and to celebrate what makes us a community, what makes us different communities, diverse communities, but communities who care about each other and who have things in common that make us human, that make us citizens of the world, that make us Edinburgh citizens, whether you were born in Edinburgh, where you had a journey like Jeff's, or I suspect if we went around the room, we'd find other journeys that were interesting and journeys we've not shared before. So maybe that's something we can do next time, is share some of the journeys about people who've come to Scotland and some of the experiences that we need to learn about for our futures. So thank you, Faisal, for inviting me tonight. It's been lovely to share the cultures, to think about Mother Language Day, to think about the international connections, and to think about the days when we get to come together in person. But today is a pretty good substitute, all things considered. Been lovely to share the time with you, and look forward to seeing you all in the future. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah. Thank you. Yes, of course, we hope that things get better and we can have our event next International Mother Language Day at the City Chambers. And I will be requesting Lord Provost to organize some food that time as well. But one thing, as you said, that COVID-19 has taught us a lot. We're not meeting, we are doing it through digital media, sitting at home, seeing everybody's faces. And thank you for sharing your burn supper idea, because I'm thinking of organizing a dinner through Zoom. So everyone can join me. It'll be nice and cheap for me, because I'll have to cook for myself, and the rest you'll be cooking yourself. So we'll organize a dinner soon. I've been told that Sir Jeff has become a very good cook. So I might take some idea from Sir Jeff. Now I'm going to ask Antonia Sorace. I hope I've got your name right, Antonia. She's going to talk on bilingualism matters. So Antonia Sorace.
Thank you very much. My name is Antonella Sorace, actually. I should say buonasera a tutti, good evening. Italian is my mother tongue, as you can probably guess. I was born and raised in Italy, but I've been living in Scotland for many years. I'm the mother of 2 bilingual sons who were raised with English and Italian. But today I'm here as a professor of linguistics at the University of Edinburgh and as a researcher who works on bilingualism and language learning. Edinburgh is one of the best places in the world for this kind of research. And I'm going to tell you something about the importance of knowing more than one language, any languages, for individuals and for societies from the point of view of the brain, so a slightly different point of view, and the importance of all languages for both the current pandemic situation and the long-term post-pandemic future. And of course, I'm going to tell you what is done by the Bilingualism Matters Centre, which I founded and I direct, both in Scotland and internationally. So let's start by saying just an obvious point. Language skills are often undervalued in this country. And there is a certain amount of complacency in the UK, but not only in the UK, in the so-called Anglosphere in general, that English is enough because of its perceived strength as an international language. Now, I would like to argue that this privileged monolingualism of the UK is a real limitation that can undermine social cohesion and the post-COVID recovery compared to other countries. Because this is language skills cannot not only bring benefits to individuals, culture, the economy, because they enable people to communicate freely with partners around the globe in their languages, to understand the local cultures and prevent misunderstanding. Maybe these points are more obvious to most of us. But my arguments are based on the less obvious points of view of research, which has shown that people who speak more than one language, any languages, and I underline again, any languages, can have a series of advantages for the mind and for the brain compared to monolinguals, people who speak only one. And I'm going to briefly focus on 3 of such positive effects. So, despite the many misconceptions that are still around, that bilingual children are confused, that they may not do very well at school, actually research shows that children who grow up with 2 languages in a supportive environment can have a better spontaneous understanding of how language works in general. So from sounds to words to sentences. And this means that a bilingual child who learns English may have an advantage at school and across the curriculum in general, because they actually have a better understanding of how English works. So exactly the opposite of what people normally think, that a migrant child may have a problem and they are sort of labeled as having a problem. Another potential benefit is an earlier and better understanding that other people can have a different perspective. They can have a different point of view on anything. Now, how important is that? It's very important in today's society, right? Understanding that different points of view, different perspectives are possible and they are all important. This comes from the simple fact of having 2 words for the same object, which opens the mind in a fundamental way. And it comes from the experience of having to choose the right language depending on who you're talking to. So depending on the person one talks to. Again, this, again, trains the mind to recognize is that, hey, I have to put myself into the other person's shoes and understand that, yeah, people can see things differently from where they are, differently from me, from where I stand at the moment. A third potential benefit is a better mental flexibility in dealing with complex situations. And this means better focused attention, ability to ignore irrelevant information, ability to switch between tasks, capacity to allocate attention in a flexible, in an adaptable way. This benefit comes from the constant experience of having to choose one language and exclude the other language or languages that we know, and from switching from one language to another. Research also, by the way, points to the fact that bilingualism can be a cognitive resource that allows people to age more graciously. It can have a delaying effect on both normal and pathological aging processes. So these are all excellent reasons from the point of view of research to celebrate multilingualism in all languages. Remember that it's the fact of having more than one language in the brain that matters, not which languages, how prestigious they are, how many people speak them. So regardless of which languages. And this should be an incentive for speakers of indigenous minority languages to use their language, to celebrate their language as a rich resource, to speak it to their children. It should be an incentive for migrant families to continue to speak their language at home, with an awareness that this is beneficial to their children's linguistic and social integration. More generally, it should be an incentive to regard multilingualism as a framework to preserve the richness of cultural diversity, as we said before, as an investment for life that can enrich countries and their citizens. Still too many people, however, don't know about these facts. Let's also remember that bilingualism brings both challenges, benefits and challenges, sometimes for children, for families, for educators. But the better we understand these challenges, the better we can find solutions. And we can create positive environments for multilingualism to thrive and for the benefits that I was talking about to emerge. The combination of Brexit and the pandemic is the great challenge for languages at the moment. Languages are seen by many as not being priorities in post-lockdown schools compared to more important subjects. In addition, we face increasing isolationism and xenophobic nationalism that brings back negative attitudes towards other languages and their speakers. So action is needed now more than ever before to reach multilingual families in lockdown and reassure them that, for example, their child won't forget English if their Polish improves. Action is needed now more than ever before to adapt communication of vital information, for example, about vaccines, to different communities, taking into account their languages and cultural expectations. That's my main message. We need to bridge the gap between research and society and provide people with effective information that allows them to make better decisions about their families, about their students, about their patients, about their policies, about their businesses. And this is where the center I direct, Bilingualism Matters, comes into the picture. Bilingualism Matters is contributed to this change. We do many things. We train students and researchers to communicate research in a clear way outside academia. We have numerous partnerships and outreach projects in the public sector. We collaborate with a wide range of partners. We collaborate with families, with teachers, with policymakers. We collaborated with the Scottish Government in many occasions, education authorities, health professionals, and we have an increasing presence in the private sector. We have a collaboration with UNESCO now on their Futures for Education framework. We have an international network of 28 branches in the UK, in Europe, in North America, in the Middle East, and in China. So this broad international dimension provides us with a very strong basis for joining forces in research and in public engagement across languages, geographical borders, and political contexts. So let me conclude now with an optimistic note. We have wonderful reasons to celebrate all languages and all multilingual speakers, and we can work together even at challenging times, such as the one that we're living in at the moment, to build a society where language diversity is understood, is encouraged, is celebrated, where multilingualism is no longer regarded as something special, but it becomes the new normal in Scotland and elsewhere. Thank you.
Thank you, Antonina. Right, thank you very much. Our next speaker is Katrina. She is from Happy to Translate. So, Katrina, I'm going to pronounce your second name as well, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. McIntegrat, is that right?
Close. An additional R. It's McIntaggart, but it really doesn't sound anything like it's spelled, so I forgive you. Thanks very much, Faisal, and Gaurav Mahagat, and good evening, everybody. So to echo all the speakers that have come before me, it's been an extraordinary year for everybody, and for many of us, we're now living and working in such a way that would have been unimaginable just a year ago. We've borne the impact that COVID-19 has wrought on our personal and professional lives. And we've used innovation and technology to make adaptations to our workspace to ensure we keep our customers and our colleagues, our families and ourselves safe. We think about those for whom the pandemic has wreaked untold devastation, and questions are already being asked about what more could have been done to help the most vulnerable amongst us. At Happy to Translate, we've been helping our members to reach out to the at-risk groups, many of whom suffer barriers to communication. We and our members are of the mindset that we cannot wait for ethnic minorities to learn English in order for them to integrate. And they need our support and are entitled to their rights before they learn the language itself. So our members have come together twice during this pandemic, both online, of course. Our advisory group, made up of Happy to Translate member organizations, has met to share their experiences of what they as service providers have been doing during this exceptionally difficult period to reach out and support the communities they serve. And our members event, where we've invited external speakers to come and share their experiences of working with minority ethnic communities, the barriers that they face due to having little to no English, and the resulting socioeconomic issues that have bubbled to the surface for everyone to see. So Happy to Translate worked with Gen Analytics to conduct a survey, which was commissioned by the Scottish Government, on the effect of COVID-19 on older people in Scotland. we were able to reach out to older people from ethnic minority communities right across the country from various backgrounds, and to get their feedback in their own language about the effect that the pandemic has had on their lives, their health and financial well-being, as well as that of their families. We were able to make these connections through Trust Housing Association's Equality, Diversity and Inclusion programme, after years of working with people at a grassroots level and building trusted relationships. This meant that their responses provided real depth and material for a meaningful analysis, which formed part of a major report that was submitted to the Scottish Government. And the common theme throughout the views that were expressed was that of having a language barrier and the resultant delays in providing official information in an accessible manner. So during the early days of the pandemic, you'll remember that everyone of every race and language was desperate for information and details of this as yet unnamed virus. So needless to say, the majority's needs were the first to be met, and every household in Scotland received the initial public health information leaflet in English. And it was several weeks before the first translated official information appeared online. And in its absence, this knowledge vacuum was filled by English-speaking family members who were able to translate official information for those who couldn't understand it, or for some by watching their own language TV channels at home, or in some cases from friends or family back home in their home country who'd watched the news there of developing situation here in the UK. So unfortunately, the vacuum that was allowed for the spread of misinformation via social media posts and the like. And so once the official information appeared online in multilingual format, the next issue to be highlighted was accessibility. So by posting the information in accessible formats on an official website, it creates a number of assumptions. The assumption that people for whom this information is meant are aware that it exists. It also assumes that they know where to look for it. It also assumes that they have the means to access it. And finally, it assumes also that they have the know-how to locate it. So all of these assumptions would have to be met before the information that had been so readily popped through the nation's letterboxes, it can benefit the most vulnerable groups of people amongst us. So language can help mitigate or stop many problems if we get it right at the beginning. This is the message that we try to convey as part of Happy to Translate, and the importance of decision makers and service providers to understand this and to encourage them to do something about it. Understanding another language is important and providing the means to communicate another language as an interpretation and translation is equally so, as this opens up financial and health benefits. It's right that that the Mother Language Day is recognized and celebrated internationally. And if we can understand each other, it provides the foundation of an inclusive society in education and in many other aspects of our lives. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katrina. And it's always good to work together. So hopefully next year, before 21st February, we can meet each other and organize a bigger event. Hopefully things get better for us. And I was thinking, I did get involved. I think Rohini sent us before the Happy to Translate logo was getting printed. I think Rohini got all of us involved to do. So I just want to hear a little bit from Rohini. We're coming to the end of our program. Before I go to next speaker, Rohini, do you just want to say something?
Yes, Faisal, I think you're right. I think when from Happy Translate, I spoke it, and then Katrina is the one who leads on Happy Translate. I think there was discussion and it went very well. And I think Katrina had gone to ELREC offices with the staff, gave them a training and explained them all the tools, how it works. And since then, they felt they never knew all this existed. Then how easy it was, for them to they really raising that awareness. There are tools and procedures which can be used by the service providers. They can then communicate with those who face language barriers or speak little English or no English. I think this is what we try to really get out and tell to the public sector, and especially, disproportionate impact on ethnic minorities because of the barrier to the information on COVID. I think it's really been very evident. And we also hope that it will then make them think in the future that how important the language is and communication is and information is. It cannot happen without. We know that everyone who needs it, and also they need to recognize that people who language, they don't speak the English or speak little English, they become also in the most vulnerable category. They needed urgent support, and then they couldn't go anywhere. They had no idea where to go when all that was closed down. So I don't want to make a lecture on it. I know we are running out by time, and it's yes, and we have already started a partnership work with ELREC, and we will continue to do so.
Thank you very much, sister. Our next speaker is representing Lusofoncia, Sylvia. Sylvia would be in a better position than me to tell us about. Is it Lusofonisa? Is it?
Lusophonia. Thank you, Faisal. Okay, so good evening, everyone. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. I hope you can all hear me. I actually had a little presentation with some examples and samples of children's work, which I would like to share with you, but I'm not sure if we have enough time for that. Someone needs
How long
to
is the presentation?
It's very short. It's just some examples of children's work, just to show you a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure if everybody's okay, we can we'll finish at 15:15 if everybody's okay with that.
And I think you need to enable me to share my screen, if that's okay. No,
John,
it's disabled.
can you help me to do that? Yeah.
You need to make me a host, Faisal.
Sorry, that I'm just, yeah.
Now, I think you're okay.
Yeah, I'm okay now. Thank you.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Sorry. So let me just start. Okay. So just to say, so that we are Lusophonías, and we are a community language school. So we teach Portuguese on Saturdays to families living in Edinburgh or around Edinburgh. We have some families from Stirling, some from West Lothian. We've had in the past from Glasgow. Since last March, we are operating online, but our normal port of call is, sorry, just going to take this, is Leith Academy. That's where we are based and where we teach Portuguese to about 40 children between the ages of 4 and 16. Before I carry on, I just wanted to say that Lusophonia stands, it's a word that means not just Portugal, but all the countries that speak Portuguese. So it's the concept that we use, a bit like Francophone or Anglophone. So the countries that are included within Lusophonia are Portugal, Brazil, and then in Africa we've got Cape Verde, São Tomé, Mozambique, Angola, Guinea-Bissau, and then we have in Asia, East Timor. So these are the countries that speak Portuguese or have Portuguese as one of their official languages. I can move on, sorry. So I just wanted to share with you some of our fundamental principles that we think that's how we see the school. So we want to empower our learners and their families about the way they see themselves, that we want them to know that it's okay to have more than one language, that it's not, as Antonella was saying, you know, this is not a problem. This is actually, we see it as an asset, you know, so it's not, when we look at our learners, when we talk to them, we see it, there's nothing wrong with this. It's more what's right with this, you know, so we want to explore that, and we really want to empower them. And we want them to recognize and to value that they have something to offer, you know, that they have something that it's good for Scotland, it's good for them, it's good for their families, but it's also good when they go home to Portugal or Guinea or Cape Verde, wherever their family has come from. And also, this is also our fundamental principle. And I mean, coming after Antonella, I'm probably repeating some of the things you were saying, Antonella, but our view is that being literal in more than one language is much more than a skill. It's not just about speaking the language. It's those, someone was also talking about this, the idea of the perspectives, the multiple perspectives that are open through speaking more than one language. And this is something we value and we encourage our learners to see as well. Just to say very briefly that we're a Scottish registered charity. We're associated somehow with the Portuguese Ministry of Foreign Affairs via their cultural institute, which is Camões, the equivalent to, perhaps you have heard, I don't know if you've heard of Camões, but they have a center actually at the University of Edinburgh. And they fund a little bit of our work with children, but mostly our funding comes through the school fees that parents pay to have their children attending the lessons. Our pupils are aged between 4 and 16. They're distributed into 4 classes. We have 4 teachers, but we have a multitude of levels. And anyone who works with languages, second languages or third languages knows this. This is the case because the children come to the school with such diverse experiences. Some have been born here, some have both parents speaking Portuguese, some have one parent speaking Portuguese who works very long hours and they don't see as much as we want them to. So it's you know, so we've got a real variety of levels there. And I just wanted to say as well that we follow Portuguese as a heritage language curriculum, which is kind of a hybrid between Portuguese or a language as mother tongue or foreign language. So it's a little bit kind of in the middle. It's got a lot of culture input as well. Our children can take examinations that are certified internationally within this common European framework of referencing for languages, and we've done this we've done from levels A1. I don't know if this means anything for anyone who's in the audience, hopefully it does, between A1 and C1, I think. As I said earlier, we are operating online currently, which is a real shame because we love the buzz of going into Leith Academy. There's other schools there on a Saturday. There's the Bulgarian school, the Chinese school, I should say probably the Mandarin school, the Polish school. So it's a real loss not to be there on a Saturday. But yeah, we've started online doing this, what we're doing just now here on a Saturday morning via Zoom, and that's what we've been doing in the last year. Just very briefly, I just wanted to show you some images of the children and the kind of the work we do, and also to reinforce this idea of integration. So what we do is that we don't take the children into the Portuguese lesson and we just focus on the Portuguese world. That's not really the case at all. So we do visits, for example, this is a visit to the National Museum of Scotland. Whenever the First Minister, Nicola Sturgeon, does the reading challenge in October time, we do the same in Portuguese and with this reading passport with books in Portuguese. So we do that. We do, as you can see there, this was obviously pre-COVID, you know, we do also outdoor gatherings and then just classroom-based work. I just had some examples here of things that children have done that have been very interesting since we've moved online. These are Padlets. Actually, in fact, if you invite us to come again next year, we'll bring the children to tell you these stories, but this is things that they have done. They have reinvented and rewritten myths and legends using voiceovers and just slides, just really interesting bits of work that have been allowed and kind of we've been encouraged. I think we wouldn't have done it, not that we're saying that COVID is a good thing, that's not at all, but in terms of pedagogies, we have been a bit more adventurous with the methodologies we use. We have celebrations of Halloween there, but also we have very important aspect that we think is really important is that children do a little bit of historical awareness, I guess. For example, they learned about the revolution in Portugal because before that we had a dictatorship. What does that mean? And then they illustrate and write poems, all sorts of things like that. And also I have this example here, which is, this is an artist who was born in São Tomé, Almada Negreiros, and the children looked at his paintings, beautiful, and they kind of review them and write, you know, critiques and their opinions about the painting. So we think that's a really interesting way of working. And sorry, just going to show you a little bit more. Just wanted this last one. This was something we did in collaboration with a school in Portugal and Edinburgh University and the children. So we worked with a photography school in Lisbon who took photographs, reimagined myths and legends. And then the children wrote those stories in Portuguese and in English, and we had a little exhibition at the university, which, you know, and following on from that, we did another thing, which was rewrite Scottish myths and legends in Portuguese. And so it's really this backwards and forwards, you know, we think it's a dialogue between the two cultures or the many cultures, because that's the thing is that we, as I said earlier, we have all these different baggages, positive ones, you know, not baggage in the negative sense that children bring with them. And yeah, finally, just wanted to leave you with our contacts. Just say that we're operating, we're delighted to collaborate, we love working with Bilingualism Matters, we've worked with native scientists who bring us and do workshops with the children about science, but in Portuguese, which is a type of language that they don't have access to, because their language is the working with, speaking with the parents, and you know, it's very different. So just our contacts, we're delighted to collaborate with you, and I'll leave you with this photograph of our Christmas party that was like everything else now, online. And I'll stop sharing now. And if you would like to ask me any questions, very happy to answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sylvia. It was very impressive. Definitely we'll work together. And I'm going to ask my team to start working well in advance before the next International Mother Language Day, and see if we can work together. And as I said at the beginning, if things get better, we'll definitely do something in City Chambers again next year. I know we all have something to say, and we all wanted to, but our time is 6:15 now. So I'm going to ask Mizan to play a little bit music and end the event. But just before we finish, I would like to thank our speakers,